this Wednesday night right here, a cage match. Now, I witnessed the last match, and I said on the interview that they're overrated, and you guys took...
Wait a minute. Not only that we wrestle two animals, they are wild too. But next Wednesday night, I hear that they want a cage match. We give you a cage match, and British Bulldogs, we're gonna show you that the Cuban Commandos got a heart bigger than any British Bulldogs, and we're gonna teach you a lesson what is wrestling. And in that cage, we're gonna go out, but before we go out, we're gonna leave you guys in a messy, bloody mess in the middle of the ring.
What do you think?
I told you, the British Bulldog, we're coming from the jungle, and we bad, really bad. We can bite, we can punch, we can kick, everything goes. In the cage, that's our game, the Commandos game. Get ready, we be there.
What can I tell you? A cage match, Stand-foot cage match, Wednesday right here in...
Ring-a-ding-dong dandy, and away we go with another edition of the Stampede Wrestling Show.
Welcome, fans. This is the Ring-a-ding-dong dandy podcast, and we're here with the Cuban Assassin number 2, otherwise known as Richie Acevedo. He is the son of the original Cuban Assassin. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming on and spending your time with us today. It must have been great growing up with what's a Canadian wrestling icon. Can you tell us about how that was growing up with being a child of the Cuban Assassin?
Well, I can tell you on the beginning of all that, yeah. When I was growing up, the childhood was a little bit different. Down here, where I live in the state of West Virginia, in a small town called Oak Hill, West Virginia, my dad, the original Cuban Assassin, he had wrestled at a wrestling event here that was called Saturday Night Wrestling. And in this area, which was, back in those days, it was the territories, of wrestling. And in this area, Saturday Night Wrestling was pretty much the same thing as what Stampede Wrestling was to everybody up in the western part of Canada, and what Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling was for people over in the Maritimes and the eastern part of Canada. So it was, that's how popular it was. But my dad left Saturday Night Wrestling in 1973, and he took us with him, my mother, myself, and my sister, and he went to Canada because he was wrestling for the Bichons Grand Prix Wrestling in Montreal at that time. Of course, he would later on go on over to the next summer, which was 1974, and 1975. We go for Emile Dupree's Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling over there in the Maritimes on the eastern coast of Canada. And then I was getting ready to be my birthday in September, and my dad and my mother decided that they wanted me and my sister to be raised here in Oak Hill, West Virginia. So my mother flew back and enrolled me here in school because I had to be enrolled. And we primarily stayed here in the state of West Virginia while my dad was wrestling. And he would come through occasionally to West Virginia. But my dad primarily at that point was gone all the time. Of course, during that time, my dad would go over to Japan, and then he would eventually end up going for Stu Hart's Calgary Stampede Wrestling at that time. And so I wasn't really with my dad when he was doing Calgary Stampede Wrestling time. I was being raised in West Virginia going to school at that time. And my dad would come in probably 1 week out of a year. That's all we got to see him was 1 week out of a year. And people have to understand that territory days was totally different. You're moving around from territory to territory and wrestling in those territories, and the wrestlers wrestle every day, and on some territories twice on Saturdays and twice on Sundays. And but my dad would come in around 1980, and then I wouldn't see my dad again until 1989 when he flew me up to Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, And that's where my dad decided that he didn't want me to have, just be having free living, not doing anything, and decided to train me and have me be a pro wrestler. And that's what they called back then, was pro wrestling, and be able to pay my own fair share of dues, such as, pay rent or whatever had to be paid for. And that's where my career started in 1989 for Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling for Emile Dupree. Of course, many years later, I would actually work for the Hart family for Stampede Wrestling, but it was called WOW Stampede Wrestling. And it was supposed to be the New Dawn. This was back in 2000 when I was there for Stampede Wrestling myself. But growing up as a kid, going through school, everybody knew who my dad was here because Saturday Night Wrestling here was a popular thing. It lasted from 1954 all the way until 1977 and was aired in a little TV station called WOAY TV. And what happened was the TV studio burnt down, and they had to use the Memorial Building, which was one of the buildings that the pro wrestling, Saturday Night Wrestling would run from. And the wrestling just died when they built the new TV Lane studio for WOAY, and it just became the wrestling, and it just became the newsroom which is still there today. And WOAY is still an active TV station this day, but they no longer had Saturday Night Wrestling, and the wrestlers went other places to make their living. And also, a lot of them was also traded on the territory system still, because the territories were still going on during 1977. And so the wrestling just ceased here, and that was the end of Saturday Night Wrestling. But my dad was wrestling still, mainly at this time, primarily for Stu Hart's Calgary Stampede Wrestling. And in the summertime, he wrestled for Emile Dupree's Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, going to Japan. And he would actually go and do a tour in South Africa. But he wrestled basically, in the United States as well during that time, for Memphis, down for Jimmy Powers' IWA Championship Wrestling. He also wrestled for Stan Mutznick's area in St. Louis, wrestling in St. Louis, and my dad also went down to Don Owens, Portland, Oregon, over there for Portland Wrestling. So my dad still was traveling around in the territory, still doing the wrestling, including for the High Chief Peter Mavia's promotion that they had down in Hawaii. So it was my dad was going everywhere, during that time. And he was an active main name. And of course, during the 80s, while my dad was in for Stu and then for Calgary Stampede Wrestling, of course, during the 80s, it was more primarily ran by, Bruce Hart and at that time. So, and of course, the first big name, the first big star of the family, that the Harts did was Bret Hart. And the second one, which would be Owen Hart. And when I was there, when it was WOW Stampede Wrestling in 2000, the center of attention was for Harry Smith, or better known as David Boy Smith Jr., or the British Bulldog Jr., whichever you want to call him, Canadian Bulldog. He also goes by, but it was it was him. But D.H. Smith was as he would call one time too, but we always just call him Harry. But it was centered around him. Of course, he was 15 years old then, and Natalia wasn't wrestling; she was there, and of course, T.J. Wilson was there, known as Tyson Kidd, and he was alongside with Harry, and during that time, and then he was bringing me in to revive the Cuban Assassins again, because Dad and I already was doing that for Emile Dupree's Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling in 1999, and we also did it for Can-Am Wrestling Federation for Steve Weil, Otto Gentili, and Steve Gillespie, also in 1999, and then 2000, Ross Hart and Bruce Hart and Diana Hart were the ones that was doing Stampede Wrestling then. And Ross was the one that brought me up to, help bring back the Cuban Assassins. And while they were doing that, I was on the house shows as the Cuban Assassin #2, but on TV I hadn't come in yet. And I never got to make an appearance as the Cuban Assassin #2 on the TV, but I was under the hood as another character called Satanicus, which was a name Bruce Hart came up for that character because of that hooded gimmick, a masked character I was wrestling originally was called the Red Devil that I used. It was just a secondary thing wrestlers have. Sometimes they carry another character with them in case they need to fill in a spot if someone couldn't make it or couldn't show up. You always had what we call back in those days, we called it build a wrestler, kind of like, build a bear, but we call it build a wrestler. And so because sometimes we just each one of us loaned some of our gear just for someone to put up, just to make up a character on the spot to fill in the spot if someone couldn't make it. And but I had my whole character, and the Red Devil character is based upon my alma mater high school mascot, because I was, raised in Oak Hill, West Virginia, went to Oak Hill High School, and this was the home of the Oak Hill Red Devils. So I named my hooded gimmick because it was red and black, which is the colors of my alma mater, was red and black. So I wanted to pay tribute to my school, the Red Devil, but Bruce didn't want to use the name the Red Devil because he thought it would be kind of contradictory to, I guess, a place called the Devil Inn or Suites or something. He didn't want people to think it was attributed to that. So he just came up on the spot with the name Satanicus. I guess he took Spartacus and Satan, put the name together. And yeah, I mean, he just did it right there. He's just like, we can't do the Red Devil. People might confuse it for this motel chain. So we're going to call you Satan, but Satanicus. And that's why that name stuck with that character. And I took that character everywhere, Satanicus too. So when I came back to the States, that character was no longer called the Red Devil. It was called Satanicus.
Now in Calgary, you actually wrestled against your father as Satanicus, correct?
Yes, yeah. Now, a lot of people don't realize that I tagged with my dad in 1999 for the Legends reunion in Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling for Mel Dupree. He had the Legends tour, which had a couple legends from the Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling TV and the territory there. Dad was one of them, of course. He was the legend, along with Leo Burke and the Beast, Leo's brother. They had Stompin' Paul Peller, and they had a couple other guys that Pretty Boy Chuck Sims. People just coming out of retirement just to do the tour. And, of course, Kurgan was part of that tour. And my dad and I were actually doing tag team. We were wrestling singles, but we were also doing tag team for the Legends tour. So that was the first time I got to team up with my dad, which was my childhood dream, was to be my dad's tag team partner. Because when my dad, growing up, my dad was the Cuban Assassin, but there was Frank Sieberstein who went as Raul, which was the other Cuban Assassin, and they were called the Cuban Assassins as a tag team. So my dad was primarily more on the tag team scene than as was he would do on an individual. Later on, when Frank would leave, and they would team him up with other tag team partners, especially there in Calgary for Stampede Wrestling. He would tag with many different people up there. I mean, Honky Tonk Wayne, or people know him better as Honky Tonk Man today, and teamed him up with so many different tag teams up there. Absolutely. Until they came up with
Jerry Morrow, for example. Cuban Commandos for many years, yes.
Yeah, and then they eventually they became the team, and that's when I started, because they teamed up in 1988, and I got into the business in 1989, and of course, when Dad was doing Don Owens in Portland, Oregon, David Sierra, or better known as Fidel Sierra, was there, and he also toured there in the Maritimes himself too, Fidel, and he and Dad was a team, and he asked Dad if he can use the Cuban Assassin name because he thought it was a really good gimmick. And Dad said, yeah, you can be the Cuban Assassin in the United States, and I'll be the Cuban Assassin in Canada. He goes, I don't plan to go back to the States anymore. And he and Fidel Sierra, we came back into the States. I think it was around it's probably around 1987, 1988, when he started working, when Ted Turner had bought the territory, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, from the Crockett's to save him from going in real big debt and create WCW. And Fidel Sierra was part of that WCW dawning there and was there for a while. And so every time people talk about Cuban Assassin, unless you're a diehard wrestling fan or a Canadian, or, people who was here in this area in West Virginia for Saturday Night Wrestling fans, then the people only remember the Cuban Assassin they saw on WCW, which was kind of a pain. And I don't blame that on Fidel. It's just that WCW was seen, worldwide. And my dad and myself were wrestling on regional,
right, territory
stuff. Right. And so it became complicated for a little while, but after, we got it sorted out later on. People realized, well, wait a minute, there's Angel, there's Fidel, and then there's Richie. And then, of course, Jerry was also in that mix with my dad, too, as the Cuban Commandos.
So that's interesting. I always wondered about promo infringement, but your dad and Fidel Sierra did have discussions about this, and he said, sure, I give you my blessing.
Yes, yeah, they had a conversation of it. Dad told me about it himself, of the conversation. And when I was in Puerto Rico wrestling for Carlos Colon's World Wrestling Council of Puerto Rico, ran into Fidel Sierra down there, and Fidel's Fidel and I, we just act like we're just brothers, like we're all part of the same family. And Fidel and I talked, and he told me the exact same story Dad told me years before I even met Fidel. And but Fidel's been wrestling, since the 1970s himself. He's been around for a while, and he wrestled under his real name, David Canal, and then became David Sierra, and then Fidel Sierra, and then the Cuban Assassin. And like I tell everybody, we're all the Cuban Assassins. It's just people just never knew the backstory to it, on how that happened and how that occurred, and they just didn't understand that my dad, he almost Vince McMahon almost had my dad there for, back then it was the World Wrestling Federation, instead of WWE, and he wanted to bring, because Vince McMahon was reaping all the talents from the territories, and Stampede Wrestling was one of those territories that he reaped. I mean, that's how he got Brett and the Jim Danville Neidhart. He got Bushwhackers. They were called the Kiwis up there in Stampede Wrestling. And here, when they came to the States, they were called the New Zealand Sheep Herders.
Absolutely. Davey Boy and Dynamite, too, of course. Big steals.
Yeah, that was his main steal there, too, was to get the Bulldogs. Brett just accidentally became a star because of the idea he wanted to put together the Hart Foundation, and he was looking at the Bulldogs more than he was looking at anybody else at that time, because that's the ones that got pushed the biggest, right? But they needed a rivalry, and the best rivalry was because people there in the Maritimes or in Calgary, they're the ones that saw the feuds that Brett and all them had for Stampede Wrestling, but the world never. So now they're on a bigger stage and bigger platform. That come up with the idea with teaming him and Jim Danville, Neidhart, and Jimmy Hart, because all the last name, and became the Hart Foundation. And that was the main rivalry for the Bulldogs. Nobody else could do anything, and so I mean, it worked out for him. But during that time, my dad, Vince brought Dad on some house show and see how it would work out, because he originally wanted Dad to come in to work Hulk Hogan. Huh. He wanted him to work Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan and them. When he got Hulk Hogan, you got Hulk Hogan's buddies. You got Leslie, which was Brutus the Barber Beefcake. He also got Dr. D. David Schultz. Ron Starr was in that mix. They were all in that little clique there that was going for Vince. And my dad was one of those people, and Hogan only trusted people that he would, because Hogan picked his own opponents. He was the star, so you want to make it look good. You want to wrestle the people within that clique that you had. And, of course, Dr. D. David Schultz was really good friends with my dad as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but what happened was Dad and Bad News Allen, or Bad News Brown, because Bad News was already there for Vince, and they got into a knife fight in the parking lot after an event. And my dad just decided that he wasn't going to do anything with the WWF then, and called Vince and said that he, wasn't going to, be there because of Bad News Brown. And Vince is like, well, look, I'll take care of it. Can you come back, please? That's enough. I don't want something that get, that all of us will regret,
Can you tell us a little bit about that bad blood between your father and Bad News Allen? What was that about? I understood some rumors it had to do with a woman. Is that right?
Well, I'll tell you what it's exactly about. It was about Bad News Brown's wife and my stepmother, who's no longer here, Pat, my dad's wife. My dad and my mother divorced in 1980. That's when the last time I saw him. I left that part out, but he got remarried. My dad got remarried and had another family up here in Canada. And but Bad News Allen and or otherwise known as Bad News Brown and my dad were actually very close personal friends, because they were one of the tag teams there in Calgary, Stampede Wrestling as well. But Bad News Brown's, or Bad News Allen's wife, supposedly has some words with my stepmother, Pat, and they had words, and then she mentioned it to Bad News, and Bad News went to my dad and said that he wanted to talk to my stepmother, Pat. And my dad said, well, what do you got to talk to her about? And he's like, if whatever you need to talk to her about, you need to just talk to me about it. He goes, no, I want to talk to your wife. He says, no, you're not going to talk to my wife. If you got a problem, talk to me about it. And Bad News judo chopped my dad in the throat, okay? And because Bad News Allen is a judo he knows judo. And so my dad grasped in his throat, but my dad was raised in the streets of Puerto Rico and always carries a knife or a blade with him all the time. And my dad just pulled the knife out and he cut Bad News with it. And then Bad News carried a knife too, pulled his knife out and then cut my dad, and they were getting into a knife fight in the parking lot. And of course, people ended up breaking them up. And then of course, ironically, around the same time, not too long after that, that's where the Bulldogs and the Rougeaus got into their big fist fight after another event. And that's where Vince McMahon decided to create the no tolerance policy. But he wanted Dad back, and Dad said he wasn't going to go back, since Bad News was there. And that's when, you saw the end of Bad News Brown and WWF. Vince got rid of him. And then my dad's like, Vince called him and said he took care of it and wanted Dad to come back. And that's when, well, now, everybody will know the only reason why he's there is because you got rid of Bad News. So Dad turned it down. And Bad News would have heat, as we call it in the business, with my dad for years. And supposedly not one of the other people that was reasoning that told Bad News also, or tried to vouch for Bad News about my stepmom saying something, which I don't believe she ever did. I did ask her about it when she was alive, and she said that she never said anything bad or, contrary to Bad News or his wife. And but Maka Singh was one of those people, Mike Shaw was one of those people supposedly that instigated that whole entire situation between my dad and Bad News. Now, my dad and Bad News Allen would come together and make amends, but it was because of me when I was there in Stampede Wrestling in 2000, because Bad News Allen was doing the commentary with Mark, and Bad News, I look identical to my dad, and I was in the hallway, and Bad News saw me. His eyes got real big, and he went into the next room when he saw me, because I look identical to my dad, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, his eyes got real big when he saw me, and I was like, and the boys were there with me, and I was like, man, I'm tired of this. I can't, live with heat from him thinking I'm Dad. So I went to Bad News Allen, and I guess the boys followed me because they wanted to see if it was going to be a fight or something. I wasn't going to fight him. I just wanted to tell him, you know, that I'm a different man, different person. My dad is a different person. Whatever beefs between them, I'm a totally different person, you know. And so I went there and I just said, bad news. I want to introduce myself. I'm Angel's son, Richie. You know, I just want to tell you I appreciate what you've done for the boys in this business and what you've done for this business and for yourself. And I just want to tell you I have the utmost respect for you. And I just want you to know that there's no heat between you and I. You know, whatever's between you and my father is between you and my father. And I'm a totally different man. You know, I'm here just to work, brother. And he's like, oh, no, man. He goes, no. He goes, I was just shocked and surprised how amazing you look identical to your dad. He goes, how's he doing? And I was like, well, he's doing well. And he goes, well, tell him to come down. I would love to talk to him, man. He goes, it's been so long. I said, well, I'll be more happy to, you know, relay the message to him. So I had called Dad, called Dad from the house there, motel there. And Dad asked me if I had ran into bad news. I said, yeah. As a matter of fact, he wanted me to give you a message. He told you to come on down, you know. He said, how did he treat you? I said, oh, he was very nice and respectful, Dad. He treated me. He complimented me. And this is true. He complimented me on my work in the ring in wrestling, and he even complimented me on the mic. If you watch the matches that's on there when I was under the hood of Satanicus. And then so Dad decided to come down and come back to Stampede. That's how we got Dad back to Stampede in 2000. And I saw Dad and Bad News over there, and then they disappeared. And now I'm getting worried. I'm wondering what's going on. Maybe, you know, he worked me to get my dad. And then I go over into the pub side because we was at the Ogden Legion there, you know, in Calgary filming TV, and they have a pub side over there. And I went over to the pub side, and there's Dad and Bad News over there having a couple beers like they were years before, like nothing ever happened. And they were sitting there laughing, and they shook hands and hugged, and that was the end of their heat. And I'm glad that they got to end that, because it wasn't too long after that Bad News Allen had passed away. And, you know, so I'm glad that they actually got to bury that heat, because they were very good personal friends, Bad News and my dad. And but I'm glad that I got to have a part in helping bringing them together and get that heat resolved, you know. And of course I can't question Mike Shaw about his instigation of it, you know, because Maka Singh's long past himself, and him and his brother both are gone now, you know, Gary Albright. And but it's just you know, those things that, you know, wrestling, and you know, because I've had people have heat with me in wrestling. Sometimes you say things you shouldn't say, and sometimes you don't mean things you say, and then other people, and then sometimes there's a bad rib. Someone's playing ribs on you, you know, like Owen Hart's the king of the ribbers, right? And you know, sometimes ribs cause heat too. So there's good ribs and there's bad ribs, and in the wrestling business, you know, you have to be kind of careful, you know. But today, you know, wrestling, you know, wrestlers are more, you know, closer. You know, I mean, they were close back then, but it was like being in a mafia, because kayfabe was the rule, and you know, you couldn't. If you was a babyface, you couldn't be associated with the heel, vice versa. And today, you know, it's all different now. So it's more closer knit, and people view wrestlers today more like movies now. I mean, now you're in independence, and it's like being in the movies. You're in the indie film industry, and then you graduate to the big shows, what they call it now. And you know, there was no big shows back then. It was just territories. And I got to start my career at the end of the territories and all the outlaw shows. You know, all the outlaw promotions is what the independents and all the indies grew from. And the only thing that was left after I started my career, all the territories were going away. Vince was getting them all. They were just going out of business, shutting down. Then you had the outlaw promotions start, the indies, and then you had your international promotions. And the international promotions, or a couple of them are still going to this day, mainly in Japan, Puerto Rico, Mexico, and Australia. And so, you know, that's what you had. And so, you know, and then also Vince McMahon it was Vince McMahon and Ted Turner, the two big shows, and then it became just the big show with WWE. And it's just like Hollywood, though, WWE.
Yeah, it's sad to see the loss of territorial wrestling. It was a big part of my childhood, big part of a lot of people's wrestling history. Now, in 1989, you came up to do some training with your father. I think you also trained with Ron Starr and Leo Burke. Do you have any good memories of Ron and Leo?
Now, Ron Starr and Leo Burke were my mentors. What people don't understand is my dad is like very, very old school and very set in his ways, you know. For example, if you talk to my dad today, if you did an interview with my dad today, my dad still pushes his character and would say, you know, he was raised in Cuba and, you know, and went to the Cuban army and was a bodyguard for Fidel Castro, right? And but the truth is my dad was born and raised in Puerto Rico and started out as a professional boxer and then became a professional wrestler and create the character because it's still fresh in the news in the 60s. You know, even though my dad started wrestling around 1968, I think. And the Cuban Missile Crisis was still fresh in everybody's mind from, you know, John F. Kennedy and all that, you know, the Bay of the Pigs. So, but yeah, my came up, my dad, he just was training me in the basics and throwing me in the ring. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I was just getting the hell beat out of me from everybody in the ring, right? And just like you would see back in the days when you see those, some people call them jobbers, we call them enhanced talents. You know, you would see like on TV or something, these guys are just, you know, in there for a couple minutes and they may get a move in, but they just, you know, get beat 1, 2, 3, and that's what was going on with me. And but Leo Burke and Ron Starr was the one who smartened me up to the business, is the terminology we use. And he's the one that told me to start fighting back. And I'm going to tell you, I started off wrestling. My first match was with Eddie Watts, you know, and in Montague, PI, Prince Edward Island. And I was under the mask called the Super Bee. And Bill Dupree, real creative, you know, at the time you had the Killer Bees, you know, and so he wanted his own bees. He called them the Super Bees, right? And then one of the original Super Bees was Eddie Watts himself, and the other one was the guy that became the Pirate for Vince McMahon later on, because he was from Montreal, Lafayette, I think, Pierre or something like that.
He's wrestling in ROH right now, actually.
Yeah, Pierre Lafayette. That was him. He was the other Super B. I came in the year after they did the Super B, and when I started, and they put me under the mask as the Super B, and I was only 180 pounds. So it's like, you know, Super B being, you know, lost weight or got sick or something, and but you know, I was getting the crap beat out of me by Eddie Watts, and of course this is still the territory days, and boys today, like I tell them today, they had to be easy. I said, man, back then they literally was as stiff as they could be with you and beat the crap out of you, you know, and it was up to you if you was going to stick around or not. But Ron Starr was the one, and I'm sitting there and listen, there's times I had too much pride. I wasn't going to quit wrestling. My dad's a legendary name, you know, and I couldn't let my dad look bad. And there's times I'd be in the shower crying. I mean, little tears coming out of my eyes, and I did it in the shower so no one didn't know I was crying, you know, because you're just in the shower, right? And then, but I was going through shock. My body's going through shock because I had never felt so much pain in my life. You know, I'm just 18 years old, you know, and just a kid just becoming a young man, you know, and they had all these names there, the Spoiler, you know, and all that. And eventually Ron Starr was in Cocan, New Brunswick, Canada, and the arena there, not Cocan, it was, Antigonish. And there's this locker rooms are separate, but there's one hallway. You come in from the doors across from each other to go to the arena. And I'm looking at one door in the hallway, and I hear Richie. And I turn around, it's Ron Starr, like hiding in the shadows or something over there, and he has his hand covered up his mouth. like he's doing something secret he didn't want nobody to see. And he's like, when you get in there, I want you to hit him as hard as you can. I was like, yeah, right, man. I'm getting the hell beat out of me now. I don't know, why would I do that, And he's like, and if you don't hit him, when you come back here, if you don't hit him, Richie, I swear to God, you come back here, I'm going to kick your ass. And I looked at Ron, and he has a serious look on his face. And I just saw Ron Starr 2 days before headbutt a guy that sped on him, broke his nose and knocked him out just from a single headbutt. And then some green guy they had in the ring, like me, I was green, and I seen him take his singlet trying to strangle the guy, and the boys had to come out and save the guy from because Ron lost his temper on him, And I'm like, this guy's serious. So I get in the ring to go wrestle Eddie Watts. Eddie Watts is still beating the hell out of me. I look over in the corner and at the hallway, there's only one entranceway to go back to the locker rooms. And there's Ron Starr sitting there with his arms crossed, and he just slowly shakes his head no. I was like, crap. I was like, what am I going to do? I'm terrified of Ron Starr at this point, seeing what he's done to these people. And I was like, I'm already taking an ass whipping here from Eddie Watts. What's a little bit more? I'd rather go ahead and take it from the guy that I'm already familiar with, him beating my ass every night. I'd rather have it from him than have it from that crazy guy, So I just, on my knees, I just drew my fist up and threw my arm back, and I hit Eddie Watts as hard as I could, man, as hard as I could. And Eddie Watts bent over, and he had this eyes were real big looking at me, and I was like, crap, here it comes. And then first time ever, Eddie Watts is like, that's it, keep it going, hit me again. Now he's feeding me. Now he's talking to me in the ring, And he grabs my arm, pulls me into he's going back, because he's going back, and he's selling the punches, registering like you wouldn't believe, And then he grabs my arm and he's in the corner and pulls me in, and he says, shoot me off and give me a big backdrop when I come out. So I shoot him off, and I, give him a big backdrop, and he's selling. And I remember I see his arm out, and I'm like, well, I got to grab his arm. That's the signal. Now he's talking to me. I look, when I grab him in the arm bar, I look back. Ron Starr's no longer in the hallway. He's gone. But Ron, told me, he said that he got, he said, I don't feel sorry for too many people in this business. He goes, but, your dad's one of my good friends, and, and I have a lot of respect for him, and I could not take it any longer, nobody saying nothing. And that's why he took the time out of his way just to smarten a young 18-year-old wet greenback kid. And then Leo started, talking to me at that point and started telling me, you need to do this, don't do this, never do this, wait until it's time to do this in the ring. So I was getting the psychology teaching from Leo Burke, and Ron Starr was telling me, he goes, don't be shooting with these guys, Richie. He goes, you got to mean business. He goes, man, just kick them between the legs, get them down, tie them up, do this, man. And Ron Starr's just showing me how to be more of an aggressive, person, stand your ground, which I thank Ron Starr for that, because that's what I had to use. I couldn't let people know just because I was young, 18, 180 pounds, that they could possibly, really beat me in a real fight. So I had to be more rough and everything, and started being adopted Ron Starr's whole ideology for that. So people were like, oh, that Cuban son, he's pretty tough and pretty mean sometimes, because you had to give that persona. So the character I had to take back with me in the locker room to get people to believe that I'm this crazy, son of this other crazy wrestler.
That's a big coup. It's a big coup. You went over Ron Starr, and Eddie Watts is one of the last kind of Canadian territorial wrestlers. He went from Vancouver through the prairies all the way to the Atlantic provinces. He was a big-time wrestler through the 90s.
Yes, and Eddie Watts also, he started putting up rings for Vern Gagne's AWA. That's where he primarily got his start, and wrestling. But yeah, Eddie Watts and I became very good friends, and I have a lot of respect for Eddie Watts, and I just wished Eddie Watts would have got his just dues in the business, because he was that good. man, I seen Eddie Watts and the late Buddy Wayne Gillis have some matches like you wouldn't believe, and I seen Eddie Watts have matches with Jeff Dupree, Renee's brother, and I seen him have matches with other people that are like A+ matches. I mean, this is stuff that should be seen on back then was WWF still TV. But Eddie Watts is one of the best wrestlers I have ever seen in my life, and I just never understood until later. I understood that not every good wrestler actually gets taken to get that big shot. And he did try late in his age to get a contract for Vince, because he came out of retirement and came back, and he was just as good as he ever was, and if not better. And of course, Vince is hesitant taking older people because you become a liability. For him, he can't have you getting hurt. But the older you get, your body does break down. I'm still wrestling today after 31 years of wrestling. I wrestled last night, as you get older, it is a little bit harder on your body. It is a little bit tougher, and you feel more pain than you ever did before in your life.
Happy New Year's from our sponsor, Manscaped. Manscaped is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming, offering precision-engineered tools for your family jewels, and is here to help you have clean balls in the new year. So ring in the new year with the right tools for the job. Manscaped is here to give you a New Year's resolution that you'll actually want to keep. The Perfect Package 3.0 is the below-the-waist grooming package that you need to start off strong this year. Or go to manscaped.com and check out the Lawnmower 3.0, the Crop Preserver, and any of the other great products that Manscaped offers. So get 20% off and free shipping with the promo code DYNASTY20 at manscaped.com. That is DYNASTY20, and that is 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com using the promo code DYNASTY20. New year, new balls from Manscaped.
Speaking of great wrestlers, how was it being around Leo Burke? He must have been a great mentor.
It was great. I got to my first real match I ever got a big win on or going over was tagging with Leo Burke, and he was wrestling Eddie Watts and Pat Brady at that time, and of course Leo's the one that won with the sleeper hold, okay. But it was great. I was learning from Leo Burke. He was one of the great guys in minds of wrestling, and I remember him down here in West Virginia, because the territories after when cable came around, we had more access to more wrestling. We were able to watch the syndication shows of the NWA, the WWF, World Class, and including the AWA. We got it all here. And I saw Leo Burke on all of them, every single one of them. And I remember him being in Memphis. He dressed up as Batman, because the Batman and Robin TV show was still popular in syndication. Mm-hmm. And he was the Batman, because they brought in Adam West. They brought him Adam West in Memphis, Tennessee. Jerry the King Lawler brought in Adam West as dressed up in the whole Batman TV outfit. But when he went in the ring to wrestle, it was Leo Burke that was in the outfit. So, because of course, Adam West can't wrestle, and the old Batman outfit from the TV show, he looked like a wrestling outfit, So, and of course, Jerry Lawler got that whole idea because of the great Andy Kaufman. In Adam West, and he got to, I don't know how he met Adam West, but he managed the Batman, and and Leo Burke was the one under the hood wrestling as the Batman. So a little thing there for people who didn't know anything about that. But Leo was great. I love the guy. I got to wrestle him in the Legends Tour, 1999. I got to do a 6-man tag and going against him in the ring, and I also got to wrestle his brother, the Beast. I was his brother's the Beast's last match. I was his last match he ever had in his whole entire life. And, it was an honor. I love that family. I learned so much from all of them, and Beast and Leo are two different style wrestlers, but Leo was Leo was a very, very accomplished wrestler. The best way I can compare Leo Burke was it's pretty much Canada's version of a Luthez, is what Leo Burke was like. He was that good. He was really, and he had the mind of the business, the mind of finishes, great mind on what not to do, great psychology. People talk about Jake the Snake Roberts psychology, but Leo Burke had a great wrestling psychology. He was really good. He knew how to tell a story in the ring.
Yeah, he's well known for that in Stampede. I understand you're recently the Cuban heavyweight champion. Can you tell us a little bit about that title?
Well, the Cuban heavyweight title, it's funny you bring that up. During the independence, and there was a wrestling group there called MSW here in the state called Mountain State Wrestling. And what happened was they put their belt on me. And at that time, Rey Mysterio just became the World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion in the WWE. And with I was wrestling on that show. There's their champion, but I was their big time over heel there. But the person that was their big baby face was this skinny guy, this skinny wrestler called Jazzy, and he was just skinny and did this car wash gimmick that I gave him because I promoted some shows myself, and he came and he didn't have no gear, but he had this jumpsuit, and I remember the movie Car Wash. He looked like one of the guys from Car Wash, and I said, "You mind if I play the car wash music and say you're from the car wash?" And then I looked around and it happened to be a squeegee there, and I said, "Here." And there was a Windex bottle, and I handed it to him and I said, "And take these out with you," and then I'll make an announcement during intermission that that you'll be squeegeing people's car windows for $5, and he actually made money from that, and it worked. But he was over, but because Rey Mysterio was over, being a small man. And I shot the idea to the booker. I said, "Hey, let me drop this title to him, because this kid's over." And the booker didn't want to have nothing to do with that because he said, we can't put a heavyweight title on us on a lightweight. And I was like, "What are you talking about? Rey Mysterio is the World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion, and people are seeing it on TV now. You can take advantage of it at the moment, and he wouldn't do it. So it kind of made me mad a little bit, from him wanting not let me drop the title to him. So I decided to, what, after I dropped this title, I don't want nobody to put their belts on me no more. I was like, if you're not going to try to work with me, let me try to help make some money, here with a young baby face. I don't care how big or small he is. If he's over, he's just over. And I want to work a program so I can make some of that money. Well, I decided to make my own belt, the Cuban heavyweight belt. So that way I can choose who I drop it to and whoever and at any given time. And a lot of people thought it was a ridiculous idea. But I'm going to tell you something. I dropped that Cuban title to several different wrestlers. And every time I dropped that title in the air, like to Mikey Dunn down in Tullahoma, Tennessee, and I mean, that place erupted. You thought he won the world heavyweight title. And it was just a makeshift belt I had made, the Cuban heavyweight title. And when my son and my nephew got into the wrestling business, I put the belt on them on occasions to let them be the Cuban champion because I wanted to do the same thing that I did with it. It was just a gimmick for me to use. I come in and I'm the nasty Cuban, but I'm the Cuban heavyweight champion. And all of a sudden we do an angle where I got to put my title on the line. I'm like, wait, and, I can't put my title on the line. Cuban wrestling rules are different than American wrestling rules. And I was like, well, you're in America and you signed a contract with this company. And we did the whole 9 yards, so I had to defend the title. And then I would drop it to somebody. Man, I tell you, it worked every single time. Every time I dropped that title to somebody, you thought the place would go nuts. You literally thought the person won the world title. It was crazy, and it worked. But that was just an idea I came up with because a lot of these promoters, if you come up with an idea to drop money, to try to make money and stuff, they wouldn't allow you to do it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I'm like, I want to make money, so
it's a great gimmick. It's a great gimmick.
Yeah,
kind of like the Texarkana title.
Yes. One of the ideas I got from that was that title, for the Cuban title, was the world-class Texas heavyweight title, and same with the Mid-American heavyweight title, from Memphis. And then there's the Commonwealth title from Stampede Wrestling was the other one I got the idea from. I was like, it's just another gimmick. Just Stu Hart was the one supposed to brought that Commonwealth title. Like he went to some other country, won it, and brought it back. Mm-hmm. Well, he just made a belt. I'm just called, because he had toured me years before his time, and remember the title, and just say, hey, they don't know anything about that title over there, so we'll just make one up over here, and made it like he brought it back, and then that's how the history of the Commonwealth Championship came. So your Commonwealth Championship was your guys' Intercontinental Championship.
Right, and it's been done before. That was Pat Patterson's first victory in Rio de Janeiro, correct?
That's right. Mm-hmm. And you see that sometimes those little small secondary titles have more prestige than the big titles sometimes. As a matter of fact, the WWE Championship has no prestige to it. It has, because he broke it up into two titles, and it just looks like a terrible, ugly-looking belt. Just because it's got the WWE logo on it, and it doesn't even resemble a championship belt. But your Intercontinental title still has some prestige to it, because a lot of those matches were the best matches, and those were and of course, your ones that's what he used to try to make his next world champion. If you do good as the Intercontinental champion, you're going to become his heavyweight champion, and because that's a prestigious thing, and it should be considered that, and like you guys had some incredible, same thing in Calgary. A lot of your Commonwealth title matches were better than the main event heavyweight title matches. It was, two young guys that are hungry, and putting everything on the line, so you believed more in those matches than what you did in the heavyweight match, because a lot of times your heavyweight matches were very predictable. The guy's going to walk out with the belt.
Absolutely true. And a lot of times in the 1980s, there were big plotting big guys on top, but the best matches were with Robbie Stewart, Dynamite Kid, Davey Boy Smith, Bruce Hart.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, they were all those people there that fought for it. Brett, all of them did, and they made that title mean something. And see, that's what people have to understand. It's the heart. When you see the heart of the boys giving everything they have to make something believable to the audience, and the name itself, I mean, the Commonwealth Championship, heavyweight champ, I mean, that sounds like an important championship. It sounds more important than the North American Championship. I mean, it just, it just seemed, so you got people out there giving their hearts for it. Well, that's what my Cuban title was. It was, like I'm literally trying to hold on to the damn thing. And the other guy's just trying, the only reason he don't really care about the title, he's only wanting to beat me for the title because he knows it's going to hurt my ego, my character's ego. And you get the audience to believe in that. That's why they went crazy for it, But I got that idea from those matches, from the Intercontinental title matches and the Commonwealth, British Commonwealth Championship there in Calgary and the Texas Heavyweight Championship in World Class. Those were the matches that people were putting their hearts into, to those guys trying to make that title seem relevant and seem important. I mean, think about it. They had the world championship, world title in World Class, but this is Texas. It's a big deal. Texans are proud that this is the Texas Heavyweight Championship. That's a big deal. You make it seem more important, and that's why you get those better quality matches. It's not that the main event matches aren't good. It's just it was unpredictable. You didn't know who was going to be the champion because they really made it look like they were fighting for something.
Now that travel to Cuba has opened up, maybe you can have the ultimate gimmick of defending that belt against Fidel Sierra right in Havana.
Well, Fidel Sierra has his own version of the Cuban heavyweight title, and so he does the same thing, with that. I would love to travel to Cuba to wrestle in Cuba. I would love to. The problem now, okay, the travel was open, but not now, not during the pandemic. I don't think anybody's going to take an American anywhere in the world today. We're kind of getting the blame for this virus, because the numbers people are seeing on the news media, which I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest, our business is about taking a little bit of truth and then surrounding it with a lot of fiction. And then you start believing the fiction more than you do the truth. Okay. Well, this virus is a real virus, but it only affects the small percent. It only affects the anybody with pre-existing health condition or anybody who's old, really extremely elderly or at risk. But everybody else will get over it and build an immunity to it. And to me, this is the biggest work I've ever seen in my life. The biggest work. And yes, if you get it, it is a flu, and it's a flu on steroids. It's like a really bad flu, but you get over it within 48 hours to 4 days. If you caught it right now, within 4 days, you'll be over it. And then once you caught it, you've already built an immunity to it. And so why would you need to get a vaccination? You've already had it. You don't need a vaccination if you already had something. Your body doesn't build the tolerance. They get the perception of this virus mutating, which is true. They do mutate. They do change. But they don't know what the next mutation is, so they're taking guesses and shots in the dark. So you go and take that flu vaccination, you're taking a big risk. Listen, I had never had the flu ever in my life until I got a flu shot. And this is the truth. And I got sick after I got that flu shot. The first time I had the flu was because I got a flu shot. And I said, I'll never take another one again. I never have taken another flu shot. And guess what? I've never had the flu. So, I didn't have it before until I got the flu shot. And then I didn't take it again. I only had it once in my life, and I never had it again. So, I think people need to do their own research. I'm not telling people not to take no vaccines. I don't want no one to get me wrong. I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying that you people need to really do their research and the homework. And as far as I'm concerned, in the American media that's showing that scoreboard on there, that's just a scoreboard, because all those deaths aren't from COVID-19. Majority of those deaths are from other causes. It's just anybody here right now in America that dies, if you have any type of flu-like symptom, they're going to count you as a COVID death because the hospital gets money for that. And if you go to a doctor, and there's a lot of people that's being treated and saying that, hey, you got COVID, that never even got tested for it because they get money for it. I'm just saying that this is a really big work, but people need to do their own research. It is a real virus. It is something to be concerned about. But if you're at this age bracket, you don't have any pre-existing health conditions, you're going to be over within 4 days. I was talking to Chase Stevens last night. He had it. He got over it in 4 days, and I'm like, it's just, to me, I just think, it's the big work. Wrestling opened my eyes to a lot of things in the world. But I'm just telling people, do your own research, do your own, investigate your own checking, and the best thing is use your own, your own common sense, because common sense will take you a long ways in life and anything. You best use your own common sense and just be safe and stay healthy. I mean, that's all you got to do.
It's a good point. We all should be self-educating ourselves at all time about this. I agree.
Yeah, I think everybody should. I mean, I've researched it myself. I think everybody should. But until they lift these travel bans, I can't go nowhere. I can't even go see my dad. if they were to allow me to come into Canada, they're going to make me self quarantine for 14 days. All right. And then when I come back, and if they let me back in the United States, they're going to make me do it again for another 14 days. Yeah. Well, now my regular job that I work, I will lose my job. Right. Okay. People don't talk about that, Well, people are losing their jobs, because they can't go to work. And I have a job that's considered essential. So now we're under this propaganda words or this socialist word, essential or non-essential. Either you're an essential worker or you're non-essential. Well, that's kind of like Adolf Hitler saying either you're a Jew or you're not. I mean, you go back and look in history. I mean, so I'm it's just ridiculous. How does that sound? Are you an essential worker? I am. You're not essential? I'm sorry. And where you going to go? How you going to pay your bills? How you going to live? How you going to eat?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to argue who is essential and who's not. I don't agree with that either. Speaking of your father, I think he's still living in Calgary. How's he doing now?
He's doing really good. I actually talked to him 2 days ago. He's doing very well. He's going to be turning 80 years old next month, towards the end of next month. And he's a tough guy. That man is tough and stubborn as a mule. And I have a lot of respect for my dad. I take care of my mom, and my mom's 70 years old, and she has a lot of health conditions. So, and I have to keep an eye on her, which after this podcast is done, I have to go check on my mom, and she just lives around the corner from me. So I have to check on her and everything. And I hate to see it that my mom, people age differently. And I guess in my dad's side of the family and the DNA is a strong DNA because, his mother and his aunt, my grandmother and my great aunt lived to almost to be 100 years old. And but my dad, he's going to be 80 years old, still in good health. He's still doing well. Of course, Leo Burke now, he's suffering from Alzheimer's, and it's I hate to see that because I've seen that happen on family members of my family here, and that's a hard thing to see people go through. And I talked to Leo about a year or so ago, and I mean he called me back and didn't realize he had a conversation with me. It was kind of sad, but because I love the man, Leo Burke was one of my mentors, and Ron Starr has since passed, but I did get to talk to Ron Starr before he had passed away and thanked him. I constantly thanked him, for everything he's done for me. Same for Leo, and my dad. I mean, my dad, you wouldn't think I would grow up to be a wrestler after my mom's, marriage ended, and how we had to live. But me and my dad stayed in touch on the phone. But I wouldn't see my dad until 1989. And here's another thing people don't realize. After 1989, I wouldn't see my dad again until 1999. And then after 1999, I wouldn't see my dad again until 2009. And then last time I saw my dad in person, he came down here to meet my kids. And they were young then. And my nephew, he never got to meet them. But he got to meet them at that time. And he didn't see my sister, Cindy, since 1980. And he got to see my sister for the first. She's the one who picked him at the airport, and so he got to see them, and meet them. And that was back in 2013. That was the last time I got to see my dad in person. Was in 2013. And
must have been a great experience to have him coming down to see his grandkids, though. That must have been a tremendous experience.
Oh yes, yeah. It was great. I'm glad he got to meet my son and my daughter, and got to meet my nephew, my sister's son, because he's got grandkids from my sister up in Canada and from my brother Sean, my sister Angie, and my brother Sean in Canada. He's got grandkids from them, and my kids are grown up now, and my nephew's grown up, and I think Angie's oldest kid is basically almost grown up now too. So, our family still lives on. Now my son does a little bit of wrestling, not much. My nephew wrestles. He wrestled last night on the same show I was on, and I'm trying to help them get their foot in the door and everything, because it's a rough business today as it was in the past. It was rough for me, because the territories that ended when I started my career, I mean, it was, you know, they were all gone by 93, you know. So, I mean, and so I was, you know, on my own, right? You know, so 93 was like the end of the territories. All you had was then in the States, you had WCW and WWF. That's the, you know, then you had the birth of the Mennonite Wars later on too, you know, when they launched Nitro, which I think was around 96. And the independents, the outlaw promotions, which, let me explain what outlaw, I don't know if people know what outlaw promotions were. In the territories, they had their territories laid out. An outlaw promotion will be someone who's just running shows within someone's territory. That's why they were outlaw promotions, because if you was if you was working for that territory, it was forbidden. It was outlaw for you to go work for that person because he's running in that person's territory. And a lot of the guys, if they wanted to make a little bit extra money, they would just put a hood on, come up with a mask gimmick so they can wrestle on those outlaw shows and get a little bit extra money without the promoter knowing it, so they wouldn't lose their job. Believe it or not, the Poffos ICW wrestling was an outlaw promotion. And Angelo Poffo intentionally created that promotion to advertise his boys, Randy and Lanny. And the whole idea was to try to get some type of feud going with Memphis, which worked because Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett realized, hey, you know, we need to do something here. They're getting a lot of attention here. They're running in our area. Let's kind of either, you know, we were going to be out at war. Might as well just work with them. So they ended up working with Angelo and took Angelo, Randy, and Lanny. And then Angelo sold the promotion, his promotion to somebody else. And then, because, you know, they were working full-time for Memphis at that time, and that's when Vince got to see Randy, and that's when he stole Randy from Memphis territory. So, I mean, Randy worked with my dad in the Maritimes, you know, and ICW. He worked with my dad, you know, during those times. Randy tagged with my dad. Lanny Poffo tagged with me and my dad back in 2009 up there in Berwick, Nova Scotia, Canada, at the Berwick Arena.
Yeah, both the Poffos held titles back in Atlantic Canada in the late 70s, early 80s. They were big up there at the time. Oh,
yes. Yeah, I mean, Canadian wrestling. See, people need to understand, Canadian wrestling is very instrumental to all wrestling. You can't go in wrestling history and not look at what Canadian wrestling done for people. Canadian wrestling's produced more stars in wrestling than I've ever seen in my life, other than the Samoan family, you know. And the largest family in wrestling are the Samoans. The next largest family is the Harts, you know. Mm-hmm. But people went to Canada and they became better. Billy Jack Haynes, okay, superstar Billy Graham, you know, Jesse the Body Ventura. Anybody who went to Canada came back better wrestlers, you know, then they became stars, you know. Jake the Snake Roberts was up there in Calgary, Stampede Wrestling. Yeah. My dad worked Jake Roberts up there, and they also, you know, were together on tour in Japan. You know, Canadian wrestling has more of a history with a lot. I mean, you look at a lot of your people today, majority of the big names are Canadians. And there's a reason for that, because I tell people, I tell all these boys, if you guys can get booked in Canada, go, because it's a learning experience, man. The Canadian wrestlers are some of the best workers I had ever seen in my life. Canadians live, sleep, and breathe. When you get in the wrestling business, they all live, sleep, and breathe wrestling. All of them. And they're all trained really well. It doesn't matter, you know, who trains you up in Canada. They all, you know, well, it does, but, you know, the main people, you know, if you go to, you know, Bruce and get trained from Bruce Hart, you know, you're gonna learn. You go, you know, to other places, in certain places up there, like for Ron Hutchinson. Man, Ron Hutchinson's produced almost all the people he worked with became superstars and champions. You know, they all became stars and champions. And I'm like, and that was the Ron Hutchinson school was also not just Ron Hutchinson, it was Sweet Daddy Sicky's school too. And I'm like, Canadians are just, you know, really good at having heart and pride, and they know the psychology. I mean, some of the best psychology I've ever seen is Canadian wrestlers. I'm not trying to say it because my sister's Canadian and my brother's Canadian. Okay, I'm not saying that because my dad lives in Canada. I'm not saying it because, you know, I got friends that are Canadian. I'm saying it because it's the truth.
What is the truth? If you look back, 1960s, it was Kiniski. If you look forward, it was the Hearts. And then there was, of course, Benoit on top. And even now, you look now, it's Omega. Omega's the AEW champion. And Jericho is still on the top of his game and one of the greatest ever. So Canada's played a huge role in the history of professional wrestling, no question.
Oh, definitely. And it's a big major role. Stu Hart. I mean, look at Stu Hart. Anybody who was a real wrestler and the toughest wrestler, and this is a bona fide fact, you know, if Lou Thez was alive, he would contest to it. If Ed Strangle Lewis was alive, he'll tell you that Stu Hart was one of the best real shooters in the world. I mean, Stu Hart was a great shooter. People don't understand that. People want to say Ed Strangle Lewis and Lou Thez, well, they were great shooters, but people don't understand that Stu Hart was the shooter. In my opinion, Stu Hart was the unbeatable wrestler, other than Andre the Giant. You know, Stu Hart slept, breathed, ate wrestling. Heart, passion, and gave the business more than it gave his own blood, his own family. I mean, and every single Hart are good. Every single one of them, the guys, the girl, man, you know, that whole family is nothing but wrestling. And you know, it's hard to it's hard to be in the business and not talk about wrestling, but that family, you know, like the Samoans, you know, they know wrestling. They're good at it too, you know, and I'm like, people just, you know, have to understand that Canadian wrestling, Canada, you know, itself has its biggest place in wrestling history and always will. I mean, some of the big events, I mean, look at the guy who trained Andre the Giant, Edward D. Coparpier, you know, I mean, there's a lot of great, I mean, some great matches, you know, like Killer Kowalski and I'm trying to, the guy, the Big Red, whoever it was, that he actually ripped his cauliflower ear off by accident, and that's where he got the thing. That was in Montreal. He even broke Buddy Rogers' leg, you know, supposedly to work in Montreal. Mm-hmm. You see, they had historic events there all the time. There was historic Hulk. Look, WrestleMania, Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. probably the best match Hulk Hogan really ever. I mean, he had a lot of them, but that's probably his best one he ever had against a guy that was hard to work with. To get a good match like that from the Warrior, you know, you just got to speak volumes, you know, and you did it, and they did it in Canada.
Absolutely, the Sky Dome. For your own career, you've taken a bit of a change in the last few years. You've been working on some movies. I know you did Wrestle Massacre, and then there's been a new one that's coming out called The Mountaineer. Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, Wrestle Massacre is a wrestling horror thrasher film by Fuzzy Monkey Films and Brad Twigg. It's released through Wild Eye, which you can buy in a bunch of video retailers. You can order it online. You can get it from Walmart, Target, Amazon, eBay. It's FYE. And if it's not there at the store, you can order it online. And it has a lot of names in it. In Wrestle Massacre, you got Rene Dupree. You got Jimmy the Boogie Woogie Man Valiant. You got the late Nikolai Volkov. Mr. USA Tony Atlas, the Raging Bull Manny Fernandez is in that movie, and so is the Sandman, ECW World Champion. And it was a challenge to do Wrestle Massacre. It was a lot of fun. It's a low budget thrasher film. I liked the movie. It turned out better than I thought it was going to be. And I'm grateful that I got to do it because it gave me a lot of recognition. But the Mountaineer is my own project. I wrote, directed it, and produced and starred in the Mountaineer, and I'm going to be having the DVDs made to sell by the beginning of the year. So, people can look out on my social media outlets, how they can purchase a copy of the Mountaineer until I get a distributor for it. And I'm also just filmed Boxer versus Wrestler, but I'm also, which is still in post-production, but I've been in a lot of different things. One of my favorite films I did was with Dean Cain, which is called The Zombie Club. It's an anti-bully film. It's a very good movie by JC Films, and you can order that through jcfilms.org, or you can actually get it on Amazon. And it's a very movie. It's family-oriented. Another one I did was called A Promise to Astrid, also another Dean Cain movie. I just filmed quite a few movies recently, too. Godsend, I did that. I did, which is come out soon later on. I did Nun Nancy, The Bridge. These are family-based films. I also did Coronavirus, Patient Zero, and Coronavirus, The Perfect Storm. And a lot of those films are JC Films. Like I said, you can get it through jcfilms.org. Some of them are in video retailers as well. You can also order them on Amazon, and Amazon has everything, I swear. And but the Mountaineer is basically a story of a young couple in this coal barren in West Virginia. He's got a business partnership with this girl's father, and he's promised her hand in marriage to his son. But the son don't really want to marry her. She's in love with this coal miner. They take off, run off the coal baron's ruthless, sends people to bring them back, and then all of a sudden they run across a mountain man that has a history of his own, and he's reluctant to help them, but he's going to help them anyway, and he tries to help this young couple against this coal baron. It's a nice little interesting story, simple little story and everything. I like it. I've done seen the finished product of it. I'm really pleased with it. I'm looking forward to people getting ready to get those copies made so I can sell them before I get a distributor. But right now you'll be able to buy them through me on my social media outlets once I get those DVDs made up, and then I'll be looking for a distributor for it. And Boxer versus Wrestler is right now in post-production, and it's a comedy, more or less comedy drama. And it's, nice little simple story again. I wrote it, directed it, and starred in it. And the main character of Boxer versus Wrestlers is called Rotten Ronnie, based upon, you guessed it, Rotten Ron Starr, and a little bit of mix of superstar Billy Graham in there. And it's just a comedy and a build up to a match. So basically, it's supposed to look like you're watching Monday Night Raw in a way, kind of like a wrestling program with other things that happens going on in a little bit of his personal life too. And it's just a comedy. It's just, but it has little personal notes. I call it a comedy drama is what I call it. And it's a kind of fun story. It was a lot of fun doing that one. That was a lot of fun. I really have fun doing Boxer versus Wrestler. And it's built up to, this, I'll give you the little synopsis of it real quick. You have this boxer. He's a 19 retro 80s style wrestler in modern day time. Never going to get a chance to be, the top star. And he actually shoots on the world champion and wins the title when he wasn't supposed to. There's a world boxing champion, and he's not doing business with the boxing committee. He's just knocking people out because he wants to be the best. This athletic commissioner is frustrated. He's also got to push the idea for a brand new MMA thing on the horizon, which is MMA, mixed martial arts, and he's trying to figure out how to introduce it. The world heavyweight boxing champion is not doing business with him. He needs to find a way to make him humble. He happens to see Rotten Ronnie win the world title on TV, and then he remembers, hey, I know that guy. That's the guy that beat my older brother in high school. So he figures he's going to kill as many birds with one stone. He figures he's going to humiliate Rotten Ronnie, humiliate the world boxing champion by wrestling a cartoon character as Rotten Ronnie, and going against a wrestler in a Boxer versus Wrestler match, and get even with with Ronnie for what he did to his brother, but it doesn't turn out the way the promoter thinks it is. But I'm not going to give away the finish of the whole movie or the ending, because I want people to be, really surprised. But the outcome, it's a win-win. In the movie, I'll tell you this, it's a win-win. Everybody walks away with a win in the movie, and it's just a good simple little story. It's just, I just wanted to have an idea to make a wrestling movie, but kind of make it, comedy and base it upon a build up to a match, to a particular match. And I can't wait to see the finished product of it. But what I've seen so far of it, I'm really quite pleased with it. So
that's really great. I'm looking forward to seeing that too. That's going to be fantastic. I want to promote you a little bit. I know on Facebook you are Richie Acevedo.
I got two Facebook pages, but I also got a public figure page as well. You can go, and that's just Richie Acevedo, actor. And it'd be best if people follow me on that. And the reason why I did the public figure page, because if you notice, if you go to both my Facebook pages, you notice I got a lot of friends on them. I can't accept so many friends, but everybody can follow me on Richie Acevedo, actor. And I got my Twitter, which is at Cuban_Assassin, the actual number 2. I'm on Instagram as Richie_Acevedo. Instagram, I think that's Instagram. I'm also on Snapchat, but I can't exactly remember my Snapchat name there. But I'm trying to figure out. You got people that forgive me. I'm still kind of technology literate on the modern day technology. I'm still trying to figure out how to get those all to interlink together, so that way, if you find my Facebook, you're able to find them all. I'm still working on that. I think I got my Instagram and my Messenger together finally. So
that's good. And you got a great YouTube page too. I was going through there looking at some of the videos. You got some great matches against Hacksaw Jim Duggan, some matches with your father. So that's Cuban Mano 2.
Right. It's Cuban Mano, one word. CUBANMANO, and the actual number 2. Cuban Mano 2 is my YouTube channel. Got a good following on that YouTube channel too. I'm really proud of that channel. I wanted to try to make it more wrestling based than anything I could, and I wanted to put things of my dad, of myself, and you can see matches with my son and my nephew on there as well, plus other matches from like Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling and stuff what's on there, and some stuff from Stampede Wrestling as well. I mean, I got a variety of different things on there, so it's people should check it out.
Absolutely. It's great to check that out. I want to thank you so much for all the time you spent with us today. I want to wish you and your family the best, and the best for your father as well. Please send him our best wishes.
I sure will, and I'd like to wish everybody who listens to the podcast and all the great Canadians up there, and I'm not trying to be anti-American, I love Canada, and the Canadians are some of the best people in the world. And I want to wish everybody a happy and safe holidays. And during this world pandemic, please do your research. But the main thing, just stay healthy, take your vitamins, as Hulk Hogan would say. Take your vitamins, do your training, do some exercise, just keep yourself as healthy as possible, and don't live in fear. We will. The world will get over this. We got over the Spanish flu 100 years ago. We'll get over this. Canadians are and please, people, go out and support your local indie wrestling show when they're able to run, because those are the future superstars of wrestling. Those are the future. Support them now, when they're young. And, and listen, you can't leave out, hey, the man Becky Lynch also wrestled in Canada as Rebecca Knox, right?
That's right, yep.
So, I mean, look, and like I said, Canada produced its champions. They produced the top stars. So go out and support your local indie wrestling, and go out and support your local people that have their own, mom and pop diners and businesses and all that, because that's how your country runs. Those are the people that run your country as well as ours. So, and be safe. I want everybody to be safe and know that the Cuban family will always love everybody in the world. No matter how many times I say shut your stinking mouths, I'll still love everybody.
If you are looking for the best books, DVDs, and posters on classic wrestling nostalgia, then you want to visit crowbarpress.com. There are literally dozens of titles there, including biographies of the likes of Bruiser Brody, Ole Anderson, Ivan Koloff, and of course, Dick the Bruiser, as we've spoke about here on the Dave Dynasty Show. You want to visit crowbarpress.com for all of your classic wrestling nostalgia needs. Again, that is crowbarpress.com.
Thank you for joining us, Stampede Wrestling fans. We hope you had a great time listening to the stories of Richie Acevedo, about his father, the Cuban Assassin. We will have many more podcasts coming up for you in 2021. Please stay tuned. And as they say, in the meantime and in between time, that's it. Another edition of the Ring a Ding Dong Dandy podcast.